Okay. So Moose, you're here at the SuperReturn conference in Berlin. How have you found it so far?
I found it very interesting. You know, I think that there's a huge crowd, and it's very much in a good mood. There's a certain upbeat step to the community at the moment. I think, you know, we realize, or maybe did not realize, how much capital was being returned to investors in the last calendar year, and that will continue. And given the general environment, you know, with the U.S. economy doing quite well, I think Europe is starting to come into a good position, and the emerging markets or the new markets are also kind of going into the transitionary or good position. You know, the level of activity is very good. And you got to remember also, having come out of a cycle of challenge after the financial crisis in 2008, a lot of general partners have improved the quality of their internal businesses. So you've got excellent businesses, you've got a good environment, and a certain upbeat step.
Right.
So now the question is not to let it get to your head, is to make sure you stay founded.
Quite right.
And you know, to be responsible and to generate good returns.
We've certainly heard a lot in the last 2 days about Europe and about, you know, the improving conditions and backdrop from Europe from all sorts of GPs, small, medium, and large. Would you agree with that? Is that what you're saying as well?
I do. In the last year, in particular, Sweden, Germany, and the UK were areas of interest. I think that this year, as the year begins, Spain is an area of interest. Central Europe, of course, has had some activity in it. And I think the laggards are probably in sequence Italy and France.
Yes.
And which is a little bit more difficult to explain, because you know, at the end of the day, they are also very competent and good economies.
Yes.
And heading in the right direction. So
Right.
I think ultimately by year end, we'll see, or mid-year, we'll see some form of activity.
Mid-year's not that far away. You know,
That's true.
That's true. So have you heard anything that surprised you or during the last 2 days? Is there anything that's come up that you weren't expecting to hear?
I think, you know, the one thing that I'm looking for, and the one thing that Europe needs in particular, if that's an area of our discussion, is it needs new blood. And you know, I think one of the things that I see when I look at the roster, when I look at the activities in this, you know, excellent conference that's been arranged, there's a lot of same.
Yeah.
And effectively, capital in the investors have decided who they favor and who they don't, and who they're comfortable with and who they will not be supporting. And so the landscape is pretty much gridlocked. And it's time for some change. And normally change comes in the wake of some form of you know, economic activity or trigger.
Right.
So I think we've had that, and that's what I'm looking now for. So I'm looking for new groups, new blood, and new energy.
Just picking up that theme and running with it for a minute, we've heard a lot, and certainly we at Altius have seen some of this. You know, this bifurcation between the haves and the have-nots on the fundraising side. Are you seeing that? Is that something?
No, it's still very much the case.
Right.
You know, because at the end of the day, one of the things that came out of the 08-09 period is that investors have become very selective. So even though they have good liquidity, they have good programs, and they have active programs, that level of diligence, that level of selection, and that level of process of selection has not altered.
Right.
And so the ability to meet their criteria or to meet the filters is still quite limited. But then saying that, different programs have different views. So the spectrum isn't as narrow as one would necessarily think it is, because the assumption is that every investor thinks the same, and they don't.
That's true.
So their risk profiles are different, their parameters are different, their targets are different, and as a result of that, the spectrum of activity can be with a broader group of general partners.
Okay.